Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health podcast. And we have another treat for you today. We brought back Lee and Monika. And Lee and Monika have been with us several times now. Gosh, I think the first one was with the Science, Mysticism, and Beyond, exploring our greater reality. No, Science, Mysticism, and Beyond, the next phase of humanity, something like that. That was the first one where we brought you guys on and we loved it. And prior to that, we had been following a lot of the messages of Kryon for probably a couple of years or so prior to that.
Yeah.
And it was really fun to actually be able to have you guys on and ask some specific questions and get some insights. So I'll put all the links to the previous ones because after that, I think you guys have been a part of just about every series we've done. We always want to touch base and see what wisdom Kryon has to share with a lot of these different concepts. And so people that aren't familiar, we'll put all of the full bios and the links to all the different shows and to Lee and Monika's work. But Lee's been the channel for the benevolent voice of Kryon for, gosh, like how long has it been now, Lee?
We're 34 years.
About 34 years.
Yeah,
And
I started when I was 6. Sorry.
3 decades.
Yep.
3 decades
Yeah.
and counting.
Yeah.
Continuing. It's amazing.
It's wonderful. And Monika is this amazing curator of the information and sort of archivist, I think, that's been able to pull a lot of the information together in a really user-friendly way as well. So we
That's
like
a nice way of saying she's my brain. Sorry. I channel and she writes it down. Yeah.
Well, we love having you guys back on the show. So this series, again, is on creating New Earth, a collaborative mission. And guys, we have had so many fascinating conversations in this series so far. And we have talked about everything from education and changes in school systems to healthcare to AI in the place of benevolent technology to governance and legal systems to, gosh, what else? New human biology and the potential this is going to afford us. So we thought maybe we'll just try to pull all of this together in 1 hour and pick your brains on all of it and just get your insights on it. So
We are so ready. And when I sat down with Lee and said, what are we doing with Jason and Tia today? Because it's always a fascinating conversation. And he read out to me that really the topic that you want to discuss is the emerging humanity. What are we seeing on the planet? And I said, Lee, I want to share something. It's not from Kryon, but it is evidence that major shift is happening exactly how Kryon said it would. And so I want to ask, are either of you familiar with Angel Studios?
No.
Yeah, so this gets me very excited because it's a new paradigm of movie making and collaborating with creative directors. So Angel Studios is a video streaming platform and it gets its money from crowdfunding. And so you have now this new player in the game of movie making and producing quality TV shows that says in its description that it doesn't answer to Hollywood. Now, you might think that's not such a big deal, but it actually is a huge big deal. And then when you start taking a look at the kinds of productions that Angel Studios is investing, again, through crowdfunding, they have released something that Kryon said was always in the works. It was a movie called The Sound of Freedom, and it was based upon the true story of federal agent Tim Ballard, who went in on his own to rescue a child and boy and then later his sister from sex trafficking across the border of the US into Mexico. And so this was the Angel Studios that put this together through crowdfunding, and it has become a huge blockbuster in terms of the revenue that it has brought in, but it's highlighting a topic that I guess many don't want to touch, and yet they have touched it, brought it to light, and there is so much information now for mainstream public viewing that have now seen this movie. And it's also highlighted the organization that are still in operation and getting donations to help with this thing. So this gets me excited when I see evidence of what Kryon tells us to look for, and it's happening now.
I want to just join in on that and say, if you take a look at who would push back on that. And Kryon is talking to me and say, that's going to be very telling. Who would object to this film? And there is pushback. And there's governments who have said, well, it's not the way it really is in my government, or there's cities that say, well, no, it's not really. This was just a movie. And also there's a lot of people that are pushing back who don't necessarily want people to see the truth. And so this is one of the first times we've been able to see, I would say, the ability to expose things without having somebody in control is going to squash it. And the next one is coming, folks, and it's the one that Kryon has also talked about, and that is going to be an expose, whistleblower of Big Pharma. And it's only going to take one, because there's going to be more. Well, I've got a story to tell here. Then there'll be another movie, and maybe even Hollywood will get involved by that time. But Monika's right. We're looking at new paradigms that are freeing us of the grip of what the old paradigm wouldn't let out. And so we are, for the first time, I think, looking at these kinds of things. To some way, the internet did that, because suddenly the whole world could talk to the whole world. And it's funny to see it, but if you are a country now that doesn't want your people to know the truth, you will squash the internet. So any country who is limiting the internet has got something. I mean, that right away is, what? You say you don't want us to know what? You won't let us talk to the world? No, you can get our news. It's good enough for you. So all of these kinds of smaller things incrementally that are starting to pop up show the kinds of things that Kryon has talked about to look for a very long time. And it boils down to change of consciousness. The public wouldn't go for that. I mean, if it didn't want it. This is totally public driven. It's public. The public's going to see it, enjoy it or not. They're going to pay for it, and either it's a good investment or not. Not a movie studio, not the suits, not somebody who's going to look at it and decide it doesn't sell enough soap or something. So this is all brand new.
Wow.
Well, I think this is really exciting too, because it's really funny in some ways too. It's like a lot of that information has been out for a long time, and it's accessible, but I feel like from a larger perspective, it sometimes has to come out in forms of movies and documentaries where people will actually sit and sort of receive it in a certain way. I remember when that The Sound of Freedom came out and I watched the first part of it. I can tell you one thing that, and I'm sure this isn't just me, but that lit up in me as being something incredibly important and this was just within the first few minutes of that movie, but it actually was going through my mind all night. I had like dreams, like there was something that stirred up inside of me, and it was the feeling of coming back and listening to when something doesn't feel right inside of you and then acting on it, because that was what the feeling was like at that very beginning with I'm not going to spoil the movie for people that haven't seen it, but within the first few minutes when things take place, the father, I think, had that feeling of like not comfortable with something and then went along with something and then it didn't turn out very well. But that to me was like this huge shake-up feeling of just how important it is for people to really honor when something in their body shakes up and tells them it's not right or it doesn't feel good, and to then act on it, not slough it aside as okay, it's probably going to be okay, like we do with a lot of different things. I feel like that time is gone. We need to really, really pay attention and listen to those signals that are going on inside the body. So I'm not sure if you guys know what I'm talking about, if you saw that, but that sensation to me was a really important part. I mean, outside of all of the other awareness from that movie, but within the first few minutes, that came out as just a massive awakening of just how important that is to honor that sensation in the body.
I think that brings up a really important point. And it's for those who are new to Kryon and the energy of Kryon, who Lee channels, Kryon describes itself as an entourage. It's not singular. And this is the biggest thing that we have trouble with. We want to think of Kryon as this singular entity from the other side of the veil that's coming through Lee. But Kryon says, I am genderless. I am an entourage. And the entourage is standing by to support us in exactly what you just described, where we have in us intuition, and it is connected to our pineal, to our superconsciousness, and the messages that we need, that we can intuit, is delivered to us in a way that we can feel and sense. And I feel that connection is getting stronger and deeper for us, because the collective is awakening to bigger truths. And it's like a light bulb that goes on, affects everything and everyone around it. And so when one comes on, it's a spark that then signals for another to come on, and another to come on, and another to come on. And so really this awakening that you see, change happens individually, but it's the ripple on effect that each of us make as we individually bump into each other that then has this greater force beyond itself that's amplified as the collective. So if you're sitting there thinking individually, I can't see it around me, collectively, it is happening. And this is why Kryon has said that not only is light winning, but imagine a snowball on top of a ski slope, and it is sitting there stationary. But when you get to a certain tipping point, gravity is going to take over, and that snowball is going to plow down the ski slope. There is nothing you can do to stop it. And this is where Kryon has said that with our awakening and moving into what we call the 2012 shift of consciousness, which we're still in, and we've discussed that before in other programs with you. But Kryon has said that that tipping point has been reached. And so no matter what darkness individuals who are invested in the dark want to throw at us, it's too late. The snowball of light is rolling down the slope, and we are headed in that direction. And so what you can do to assist that is to claim that as your truth.
We are looking at this. We've talked about this before, folks, and so it's kind of a repeat. But there are two snowballs we can identify just in the last few years. One is the Me Too movement. It just wasn't one case; it was case after case after case of something that's been happening for hundreds and hundreds of years, and suddenly it matters. And the other one was what was happening in the church with abuse for kids. And we never had a leader that really could do anything about it. Every pope has known about it and wanted to do something about it and was stopped. And this one was able to make a difference and is still trying. And that started to be seen and cleaned up. Those are two examples of snowballs that have always been there, but never had a tipping point. And when they started to tip and go down the hill, they're unstoppable. Now everybody is looking at something. For instance, movie stars who misbehave. And they're not nice guys or gals or whatever, and they'll go on trial or whatever, and they'll be acquitted or whatever. There's always smoke when there's fire, and they say, well, I'm glad that's over with. Now I'll get hired again. No, they won't. And over, you're seeing it. People are starting to wake up. Oh, they're not nice people. They're unfriendly people. And, what has it got to do with their acting? Nothing, but I don't want to watch them. And they're not going to get hired. There's another snowball that we're seeing. That's just an awakening of conscience. Now, I'll give you one that hasn't happened yet. That's for the future. And maybe by the time we get back again, you'll see something happen. So if I look at all of you and say, how many of you are tired of our politicians and the way they're acting, where everybody hates everybody and everybody insults everybody and everybody's doing their best to get rid of the other one? I mean, how is that helping our country? It just looks like a vendetta of both sides against the other one, just fighting all the time. Meanwhile, there's really not much getting accomplished for us. We're paying the legal fees and all of it. And there it is. So what Kryon said is there'll come a time when we will look for and vote for the most compassionate candidate. The one who doesn't do that, and his people don't do that. And even when he faces the opposition, perhaps in debates, he's kind and acknowledges them and then just states what he feels. And they look at him and go, wow, I don't even care what side he's on. I want him. That is also what Kryon has said is coming. So this is another snowball that perhaps is perched there. So you heard it here first.
Wow, goosebumps. I feel like what I'm experiencing more and more is even with the human biology that is changing, and I'd love to hear your take on this in a little bit more detail from you shortly. But I feel like we're naturally not even gravitating towards those things that we perhaps valued more in the past or thought it was important in the past. Or I know that, for example, when we've traveled recently, and in my memory, I have thoughts of, oh, I really loved going to this place and, indulging in food or in entertainment over here. And when we actually do visit those specific places, it doesn't hold the charm or the glamour or the sheen that it used to, that I recall in my memory. So I know that there's changes happening, and that's how I'm able to recognize them very clearly myself now. And that's just one example. But as you're speaking of these the shift that's happening, what is it within the human biology that's changing? That is it the consciousness that is allowing the biology to change, or is it physical earth changes that are then bringing a level of consciousness on? Like which comes first, or is it all simultaneous?
It's simultaneous. But Kryon has mentioned many times something that is just the wildest premise, and people roll their eyes and all. And he said, if your consciousness becomes high enough, disease won't touch you. And you go, that's pretty good for a movie, but come on, let's get real. What Kryon is really saying is consciousness can change your chemistry. Now we know that. First of all, I had a conversation the other day. I think it was a nurse who knew what I did, and she was, you could tell that she wasn't really interested in listening to what I had to say or as a channel or anything else, and especially the part what I just gave you. And I said, listen, as a nurse, would you tell me what is the result of fear, worry, and stress? And she said, well, it causes diseases and may even, kill you someday. And I said, now, reverse it. What if you go the other way? What would be the result of joy, happiness, meditation, all these things? And there was a blank stare. It's like, well, nobody ever taught me that. It's like, it's not even on the charts. It's gonna be. And that's the whole point. There'll be some research someday over those who are more joyful in life, and maybe the meditators, or maybe even us. They'll start looking at why we're not getting sick. And somebody is going to say, seems to be that their chemistry is actually bolstering their immune system somehow, and they're not catching anything. And we only and they may not even quote eat right. That's another story. And you're looking at it and go, is it possible that your consciousness on the planet right now, which is changing and becoming, I would say, a greater tool for this, it really is accepting what we're doing? The planetary, I would say, energy right now in this shift. Kryon says, for the first time, you're starting things move so that when you begin something like this for yourself, suddenly it starts to happen like it never did before. So the planet is changing, the energy is changing, then to allow us to think higher and allow us to find things we couldn't before, allow us to become more healthy. People don't believe I have not had the flu in 60 years. 60 years. And so when they look at and they say, it's time for your flu shot, Mr. Carroll, I'm going, what planet was that on? I don't even remember it. I've had a cold for 4 years. Not to say that I won't get one or something, but I'm saying my immune system is wonderful. It really is. I don't get sick. And it's not that I'm eating correctly or taking the supplements. It really, truly is not. I think it is attached to what I believe. I think it is attached to the affirmations that I say, the gratitude that I feel when I wake up in the morning, the connection to spirit that I have and I've had for decades. And that's what I teach. And so I just let people know that I'm trying my best to live what I believe, but in that particular instance, it's worked. So folks, that's why we have a healing show also every week, because we want to share this with the guests we've had, including you two. That's it. So such a wonderful question. I get very excited because I truly believe how we think is our health.
Lee, I completely agree with you. And it's just funny because we were even having a conversation a little while ago that it's like people have no problem for the most part. These are even in different camps on where people are with just sort of the world situation, everything. But a lot of times people don't have a hard time thinking that there's detrimental things that can cause harm, whether that's EMF or whether that's radiation or whatever it might be that can cause harm. Or like you said, that severe stress and fear and these things, we know that's very well documented. People don't have a hard time doing that, but they seem to have a harder time that maybe there's actually really cool technologies and maybe through practices like meditation and gratitude and these things that it actually can do the exact opposite end of it, and be completely supportive. I don't know why there's this, whether that's just that people's focus is more aware of that because that's more what's talked about. But I completely agree with you. We had an amazing interview that kicked this off. It was a 2-part interview with someone named Ralph Sudeth, who's been a water researcher for a long time and has made some, I honestly feel like he's like 100 years ahead of his time with what he's been able to look at. But
COVID actually caused him to come out of the Amazon.
He actually said, he goes, when I heard the pharmaceutical companies were coming to save you, he goes, I had to come back. so he came back and he's like, I just got to share everything I got. And he's just a real beautiful soul. But he had been researching this for a long time, and he would hire like Harvard and MIT faculty to research what he was finding. But exactly what you said, at a certain level of consciousness, like Kryon had said, disease cannot thrive. And what he found with his water was that they would actually put 2 different groups, his specific structured, and it wasn't just structured water, but it was vortex and it was structured and it had specific geometry back into it. It was very, like he says, not just live water, but and because this was like supernatural water, and they could not grow pathogens in that water. And the researchers saying it's not like it's killing anything, it's not housing an environment for it. And so this is exactly how I picture that with what you're talking about, or what Kryon had said around consciousness at a certain frequency. And this is even what like people like Joe Dispenza has seen, at a certain frequency, tumors drop off. It's like they are no longer in resonance and they no longer fit. And, to me, it's like, it also simplifies this mystery of illness in a certain way. And I know there can be lots of different layers to it, but from my perspective and what I've seen myself, and how quickly things can change when you are able to kind of transition into a different frequency or a different state of consciousness. I also think in that higher state of consciousness, there's more room for different answers to evolve and show up that we were maybe not privy to in a smaller field of consciousness. So I absolutely think it's got to be a big piece of what we're going to be moving to in the future as we move along for what health is going to look like in the future.
And if I could say to your, and I want to let you talk.
Yes.
I want to ask you something in a minute as well.
Okay.
But if I can say something about specifically, let me see where you were talking. I lost it because I got too excited there, and I was going to speak. I'll just tell you. I'll just say this to anybody listening right now. This is not something you're going to have to do as a master guru. I mean, this is not the future. This is now. We're talking about higher thinking. You don't have to go to India. You don't have to do all of those things. You don't have to become a this or that. It is available right now. You know, if you're going to do your laundry or taking care of the kids or whatever, it just has to do with your consciousness and what you accept, what you don't accept, and you know, is there a bigger idea of what God might be to you, a little more personal? That's what I say to people on this whole Kryon thing. Just God got bigger for me than I was ever told, you know. And what if I told you you were born magnificent and you deserve to be here and you're really loved by all the angels everywhere? Would it make a difference? And that's not what we are taught. And so this kind of thinking that we're talking about that can chase away disease, you can do right at home, folks. Try this at home. One of the things now, it's a personal story that I've never shared before, and I want to turn to Monika. Maybe she wants to share it or not, which seems to be the opposite. But just to show you what we're talking about, we were in India on the Ganges. Do you remember?
Yes. And
the gentleman who was with us, and maybe Monika can tell you a little more about what he did. Do you remember that? When he told us that he
regularly drinks the water down from Mother Ganga in the city of Varanasi.
Yeah.
And
so for us,
we had this cultural bias of what that water is. And for him, I mean, that is a sacred river that represents nirvana. Mm-hmm. And when he was drinking it, I still couldn't quite get my head around it. But it wasn't until Kryon gave a channel where we were invited to look at how much consciousness comes to these waters and projects the energy of the Creator within that water, and how that changes it for them. And they're able to really, as he said, he's never been healthier. He drinks the water every morning. And again, our cultural bias was, this is horrible. I would never drink that water.
I wouldn't use it to wash my hands. I mean, it's probably the filthiest water. And I mean, you've got dead bodies and feces and, you know, they're just floating by. So no, thank you. And he drinks it every day.
But what I was excited about sharing, because you mentioned the scientist who had the water that you couldn't grow pathogens in. Mm-hmm. I mean, hello, that should make everyone sit up immediately and think, wow, we are 70% water. Mm-hmm. What can we do to create that environment that our cells exist in? And so Lee and I were very privileged to collaborate with many other individuals, and we've met along the path a Israeli director by the name of Tzipi Raz, and she has been invested in creating a documentary called The One Field, and she's really interested in this topic, consciousness. Can it change physics? Can it be measured? And so her whole thrust and drive is measuring changes through consciousness. And so through this process of her reaching out, there are some wonderful musician friends that we know, Anders Holte and Kachina Medju, and his toning is so beautiful. And the way that Kachina accompanies him is just exquisite. There's another scientist by the name of John Stewart Reed who does psychosomatics, and he's measuring sound and looking at the patterns that grains of sand might make on a speaker, for example. And so they did this experiment, and it is profound. So when you donate blood, there is a certain longevity to the vial of blood before the blood cells will die and are no longer able to be used. So they wanted to do an experiment where if consciousness indeed changes and has an effect on physics, would sitting down and toning, singing to a vial of blood have any impact or difference at all? So here is the premise. And so to create this experiment, one of those vials of blood was placed within a Faraday cage to eliminate any kind of influence or effect onto that sample. And so then another of the same blood in a different vial was placed in another situation where Anders and Kachina could tone and play music directly to this vial of blood. Then it was time to do the measurements. So out comes the vial of blood from the Faraday cage, which is theoretically the control group because nothing was able to influence it. And I believe John was able to count the number of living blood cells, could see it very easily and count them very simply. Next, when he had to take that vial of blood that had toning sung to it and count the number of blood live cells, I remember Anders saying, John shook his head and they thought something was wrong. And what was wrong was that there was too many blood cells, and the machine was saying you have to dilute the blood to get a measurement. I mean, doesn't that just blow your mind how singing and toning was able to create such difference in the blood? And so I leave it to you. Is the power of your voice, does it have an effect? If you were to hum to yourself or sing to yourself, would it have an effect? I leave that to you to answer.
Also, wasn't it? Didn't they find out that the bottom line was that it might let blood last a lot longer in the blood bank?
I think it has quite a practical application for blood samples. Yeah,
right. Things that people would never ever do in medicine, perhaps, and now they're discovering another kind of physics that has to do with consciousness.
Yeah, I think it's all fascinating. I really do think that this is all stuff that's going to, and who knows, maybe it'll be intoning, maybe it'll be isolating what those specific frequencies and wavelengths were, and then doing it in another way, or some combination of all of it. All I think that's also really important is that people actually have these direct experiences with these things too, because when you actually go in and take part in something like that and be a part of like a toning experience, I mean, it hits you in a certain way and you feel it. And even if you can't even measure it, I mean, it's important to have the measurements so that we can actually, validate them and move forward with it. But even without the measurements, it's like if people are just having these experiences that you start to feel stuff in your body, you start to notice that you feel different. Your health usually improves in different ways. Your energy levels change a lot.
I know that my father is he's been sick for a little while, and we have little girls and who go and sing to my father often every day.
Yeah.
And there is a couple of songs in particular. My dad gets welled up every single time that the girls are singing to him these songs. And he said, I don't know what it is, but every time they sing that to me, I get all choked up. I don't know. But it totally touches his heart. And it, this is a really fierce, strong man, but it totally breaks him down and softens his edges.
Well,
I love that.
Have either of you had Jonathan Goldman on your show?
Yes.
Yeah, we know the
Yeah.
Goldmans well, and
He'll be
Yes.
back on this. We actually hum every night
Yeah.
with the girls. That's
It's
before.
He's a
part of
hum
how
master.
we
Both of them are wonderful. Yeah.
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 Well, they'll
Yeah.
be on this series too. We'll be speaking to
Great.
them later on. And it was when you were talking was reminding me of them because they'll often say frequency plus intention equals healing. And
Correct.
so it's the toning and the sound tied in with the loving intent that goes with it, which is what I always think of it like the frequency itself or the sound is like the carrier of the information which comes with the intention. And then that's what we just embody, and then we just suck it up on a cellular level. And especially, and this is where the levels of, I think, care that are tied into things, because that's been a big missing piece in medicine. It's like, it's not that they don't care, but it's almost been trained to kind of separate it out, to not allow the care to be in there, to keep it sort of scientific and
professional.
I feel like really health has got to be this reemergence of these things, because we're going to realize that that's the essence of the healing balm, comes with that component of care. And so when you see that, when our girls sing to them, I see him kind of break down. I mean, the other thing is he was supposed to probably have passed away about a year and a half ago, and he hasn't.
And the medical professionals have repeatedly said that to him in person, like, you don't have time for very long. You should get your affairs in order. And he comes back from those appointments. Some of them I've been to with him myself as well. And I'm questioning the doctors and I'm asking them, like, how do you know? Like, I get upset with them. I get a little angry with them because I really don't think it's their place to speak that way to people who are vulnerable and are seeing the medical authority as a guiding light in how they're going to be working through their physical challenges. But yes, every single time it's like, a little time with family and lovingness of the grandkids.
Right back up.
Yeah. Boost back up.
Words are so important. And we also have another woman who does amazing things with the power of consciousness, is the name of Lynn McTaggart. And what you are sharing is exactly the kinds of things she has shared with her audience when a diagnosis was given and saying, that's it, you have this amount of time. It has a huge impact on that person. And yet that same person went to another doctor and said, oh yeah, we can fix that, not a problem. The hope and the level of expectation of something possible shifts and healing can occur. And so I really believe that the next shift we will see within the community, one is recognizing energy medicine exists, but the other one is what I want to call, I guess, bedside manner, how we approach talking to someone about an issue. And I do understand from a medical point, they are the ones with experience. So Lee went through, earlier this year, he went through open heart surgery, and it was something that needed to happen. And so you listen to the advice and then you throw into it your consciousness, but it's very careful how you posture the information you are giving to the person who you are trying to heal. But also we as individuals, I think it's up to us to filter out the diagnosis and put our own consciousness in there so that we can override, if you will, anything that is less than for our own magnificence. And when we did a Kryon Summer Light conference, we had the pleasure of having Matt Kahn with us, who is a beautiful channel. And I loved hearing about the fact that he can sit there and meditate to heavy metal music. When I heard that, I was aghast because it certainly doesn't put me into a place of calm and peace. But here is the point of why I'm even sharing that. is because we are the ultimate architect of our inner structure with our consciousness outside of whatever influence is happening around us. And that's where Kryon, I think, has been giving us these messages so that we can step into our mastery and be in that space of mastery and not be reacting to things outside of us. I have to admit, I'm not there yet. There are things where I have improved, but I am not there yet. Is there anything you want to add to that, Lee?
I think you're there.
Oh, you're biased because we're in love with each other. But
Yeah.
yes, I'll take it.
No, that's right. And we're constantly working. The energy is shifting. I think the two of you know that. Just from the numbers of shows you've had and watching things, perhaps even with the same guests over and over, that to weigh in on things that you're interested in, you have probably watched some things shift even since you started, and we have as well. I think one of the biggest shifts we've seen, because we do a weekly show and we have a guest on, and this is our third year, so you can imagine the number of guests we've had, number of weeks times 3 in the year. And more of them I have the same message. And it's so interesting to watch this collective occur, because the disciplines that we present with them are very different between them. But there's one very common thing they're saying. The energy on this planet is shifting like it's never shifted before. We're starting to see things. For a healer, they're starting to see a lot more response to what they're giving, finally. And they used to have a number of how many got it, how many didn't, and because of what. Or now they're saying that they're mostly getting it. In fact, there's a lot of people who are waking up and discovering it by themselves. It's almost like we're seeing lights being turned on, that people are starting to see things that they never saw before. And they're starting to become more interested in the esoteric things, the spiritual things, in a way that isn't religious or doctrinal, just an overall feeling of, wow, there's something here, and I would like to know more about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've totally seen the same sort of things and experienced it ourselves too. This is almost like what Tay was talking about, where some stuff kind of loses its luster a little bit, and naturally other things are just more enticing. And I mean, even as simple as a stronger desire to spend more time in nature. You know, it's like I'm finding a lot of people are just wanting that more and wanting less time in other things that might still have their fun or something, but it's just a subtle, maybe sometimes,
hence the 11 chickens and the kitten and the dog,
but just a new way of doing things. And this is why we like having these conversations, because we too will see overlap between lots of different guests. And I always say, whenever we start to see these same messages popping in from very diverse people in different industries, there's something really important going on, because that's happening universally then. And those are the things I always want to pay attention to. Lee, you had said earlier that Kryon had been speaking for quite a while around some of these different signs to look for in regards to these changes that were going to be taking place. And that was kind of right at the beginning when when they were talking about, crowdfunding now to support certain things. What were some of the other signs that you can remember that Kryon has sort of mentioned to be on the lookout for, to remind us that we are really going through a transition into a different way of doing things?
Well, one of them is really a hot potato, and we have discussed it before. AI is not going to destroy the world unless we let it or expect it to. AI can, and now this is very, very controversial, cannot think above its programming. You haven't been told that, because every movie you've ever seen about it, AI gets self-aware and takes over the world and kills you. So it's tough to get past multiple movies where AI becomes the bad guy. But one of the things that AI can do for us, and we can't let it become us and write our poetry and write our music. I mean, stay away from that. We have to be careful how we do this, and there's got to be rules around it. But one of the things that it can do for us, it's on multiple levels, is save our lives. there are tools here that Kryon says, including one of them that Greg Braden talks about, and he's on board with all this. Imagine your body doesn't really know the difference between certain things that happen, whether they're real or not real. And when you have a situation, for instance, where you're told you're going to die, you expect to die and you do. And you have another situation where the doctor says, well, no, you've got a long time to go. And suddenly you last a long time. What just happened? What was real? The answer is your attitude. Your chemistry, your mind, your consciousness was the most real thing right there in the matter of health, life, and death. Imagine going into a virtual healing center where AI has made such a real experience that you physically walk into this place, and through maybe putting on goggles or whatever, you go to a place where you actually see your tumors reduced, and with tools, with real people walking around that you can touch, and you come out and your body has experienced a full and complete healing, and it was so real, and all you've done basically is an experience. And then you go to have it checked out and find your tumor's gone down. And then you start to realize, wow, this is a virtual healing experience, enhanced greatly, made as real as possible, where you can touch the people and talk to the people who are doing this through AI. The other is research. When you take a look at some of the things that have happened on this planet, that we have biased research, we look at things, we look for patterns in areas where we think there are patterns. And you can't help it, whether it's an atom smasher, a cyclotron, or making thousands of patterns in a minute, and then you just have to select the right. You tell a computer what to look for, and the computer only looks for what you told it to. AI won't do that. It's going to look for patterns everywhere in everything, and it's going to be able to do it in days rather than years. I came out of a situation where, when I was a little kid, we were told to report to the cafeteria. I'll never forget it as long as I live, where they were going to give us the it was the polio vaccine. I forgot whether it was Sabin or whether it was Salk. I think it was Salk, because he's in my town and he developed it. And for a decade or more, we had watched on television and seen billboards for kids in crutches and wheelchairs. Polio was killing people, and kids first. And it was just awful. And we were, just as kids, we were afraid of it. I had a friend actually who got it right before the vaccine. When we took it, it was gone. How many years did it take that researcher to find the pattern of chemistry to save those lives? And the answer, I don't know, maybe 20? When we had DNA and they discovered that it was a double helix, and we had Watson and Crick give us the pattern of it, and then they started doing the shotgun technique and finally identified all parts of it and realized that 90% of it didn't do anything. It was called junk DNA. I don't know if you remember that. 12 years went by or more before a discovery of patterns that they never thought were there. And they went, oh, it has patterns of language. It's about the blueprint of the manual instead of the chemistry. There's all manner of things. We wasted all this time because we didn't know what to look for. AI will, because it's going to sort through just massive amounts of stuff and find patterns. Kryon said the cure for cancer is going to lay with AI. He said, don't throw it away. It's going to save humanity. And this is a lot different than what you're hearing right now from very important people that say it's going to be the end of the world as we know it. So don't believe everything that you hear. Just remember, on AI, be careful what we do with it. It's not because it's going to become self-aware and destroy the world. It's just that it might be. Don't let it become us. That's the biggest thing I tell people. It's one thing to have it, take out the trash, but don't let it write our poetry and write our music and become the creative center. There's a tendency already to do that. And I hope it run its courses. Its main thing is going to be health.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Kryon says.
That's really funny that you even mentioned that, Lee. I have talked to Taya for the last several years around how cool would be if you could literally be in a virtual center where you have stuff set up and you can see it almost like a like like in Star Trek where you can go in the virtual reality lounge and basically see everything, and it being so real, and that you're even you're visualizing programs where you're visualizing your tumors disappear, health improving, or immune cells, whatever you want to, and you're also feeling the sensations in your body at the same time. Like, of course you're going to create a stimulation and effect in your body. So I've had that same picture around that, and I think that would be incredibly powerful. It's like everything right now, people just like, it's also everybody has a tendency to go way far on either extreme around it and throw it all out. It's like that whole concept of the baby out with the bathwater. It's like there definitely can be a place with technology, there can be a place with AI, all of that stuff, but it goes back to like what Steiner said, it's around moral technology. It's who's operating it and what's the intent behind why we're doing it. And then I think don't give it over everything. Don't give your humanity over to it. That's kind of the key thing. I think we have to be aware of when we are letting something like technology or AI take the place of something that we can kind of inherently do on our own, and maybe even better than AI, but let AI have its place of where it can help us. I agree with like data assortment. It's like there's a certain point where I would see my stepson in grade 12 when he was going through that, using AI programs to figure stuff out and I'm like, well, that has just changed the way school is now, because it's like the way we were doing it just does not make sense anymore, because nobody's going to do it like that when they have access to a technology that can do that part of it. But again, it shouldn't be having you write your own poetry or these types of things. So
which he also used it for.
Yeah. So, but of course they're going to initially.
Of course they
I think this is sort of like you push against the edges until you kind of find back, That's where I think we are with AI, and we'll eventually figure out where the real gold's going to be in it, but it's going to tie in with the shift in consciousness that is taking place, so people know where to put that in its right place.
And I have a question with regards to that. Has Kryon indicated anything around, like, I feel like even as you were describing the ways in which we will activate our own innate ability to heal, for example, is this then just a bridge to allow us to come to a place where we will then actually claim our own ability to be able to know fully that we are in fact able to heal ourselves?
Yeah, it has to do with innate, and Kryon uses the word quite a bit. So innate is starting to wake up and realize its power. And so the eventuality, the snowball that's coming, is that we will at some level just automatically realize, hey, I can do this myself, or I can do this with the assistance perhaps of some supplements that I don't have enough of, or in other words, I'm in control of this. And that is in general, we're talking about in general health. I mean, one of the things that also is, I mean, you got to, it's what you just said, you take it to the extremes. If you get in a traffic accident and you're really harmed greatly, and you got your arm is hanging off, and they don't take you home to pray. They take you to the hospital, and there you have very fine surgeons who have put you back together. I want you to know there's a balance between good medicine and good health. And in general, we're going to have situations where the hospitals are repairing people because they got in accidents. And we're going to find fewer and fewer of the diseases and the things that they're spending so much money now and effort on trying to cure, because we're finding that we're curing it ourselves, and it's not happening as much. I just remember the polio. It went away. I mean, that was a big deal, folks, and you weren't there. I was. And as kids, it went away. And so I see that as a consciousness thing. The higher we think in consciousness, what about a day when nobody gets cancer? And you go, well, did they find a cure for it? And you go, well, not really. It's just not occurring as much anymore. And you start realize what really totally happened. Well, perhaps the consciousness of the planet started increasing, or of our culture started increasing, or maybe it was the virtual things that we're talking about now. But that's the kind of future we're looking at. People will say, well, they've said, Kryon, will there be a cure to all diseases someday? And the answer, and with the thinking of there's going to be a pill for everything because we're going to get so advanced, we've cured everything with a pill here and a pill there because we found the right chemistry. The right chemistry's here. And that's going to be the future of health and life. Life expectancy is starting to be looked at. We have I just happen to be, I don't know, part of my life is being associated with high scientists. I am not a scientist, and I didn't even study chemistry or any of these things, and yet I'm with these guys somehow are attracted to me because they originally were attracted to Kryon. And so what Kryon has said has come to pass in so many ways. Physicists, they were always calling me. Well, we've discovered this, and Kryon said you might. So we take a look at this, the Da Vinci 50. Look it up. It's a very high thinking group that is, there's Nobel people in it and all. What they're looking at is longevity. They're starting to realize that we control how long we live. It's about time.
Wow.
Fascinating.
So we're in Canada, as you know, and boots on ground. I'll share some details. There's been lots of censorship laws that have actually passed. So lots of bills that have passed into law this past year very quickly. There has been a law passed in BC, British Columbia, west coast of Canada, that people are able to carry with them 2.5 grams of hard drugs. So we're seeing lots of homeless, lots of drug users out in the open when we go downtown and certain places around on our island. What else are we seeing? We're seeing the law passed of natural supplements being restricted greatly. So I think when we're speaking of higher consciousness and the raising of consciousness, why is it that we're seeing what we're seeing being able to be accepted or be pushed in this way?
It's the pushback that Kryon talked about all along. He says, as the light turns on, the people who are invested in keeping it dark will come out of the woodwork. And they're going to try to beat you up, and they're going to try to take it away because they're afraid, because you're waking up. And so I fully expect these kinds of things will get probably worse because they get better. And then you'll get the movies, then you'll get the whistleblowers, and then you'll get the books that are the ones even from those perhaps who saw it coming and were part of it, saying, you ought to know some things, folks. And then it starts to crumble. This is the way of it, and it is, because it has to show itself in power first, and then with enough Canadians, they can make a difference. And we in the States have started that has happened to some degree, but there's so many more pushbacks to Americans because we're born with this thing that don't push it around, don't make us do anything. We'll carry guns if we want to. I mean, it's really tough to get past certain kinds of things, especially for the government to pass laws. But they do anyway, and we're starting to see, especially in the supplements, they want us to stop it. They want us to sell us. They want to sell us only what they want to sell us, and they want to tell us what works and what doesn't work, all the things that Kryon said was coming. So again, who is objecting to the light? Take a look, folks, because they are invested in the dark. That is going to change. It'll change. Even if it doesn't change now, it'll change for the next generation. The kids are different, if you've noticed, and they're interested in metaphysics and esoterics real soon. When I started, having done this for 3 decades, my audience was over 45. That's who came to see Kryon. And we knew it. Those were the demographics. We don't have any young people. Now, this has changed because we are online, if you want to say, and we are on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and all that. However, what we are seeing is that 45 has now gone to about 30, and it's going lower. Kids are starting to be interested in these things way sooner. That's going to help. So you're going to have a whole generation of objectors soon to say, no, you can't do that. And some of them will become the politicians, and some of them will become the school teachers. You know what's next.
If I can add a little to that, is a broken system is so much easier to control than a thriving, healthy system that's independent and doesn't need controlling. So I think that those things are in response to wanting to gain some level of control. And, it breaks your heart when there is this substance abuse, there is this homelessness, and there probably is a large number who are checking out of their physical bodies to go back home onto the other side of the veil. And I don't remember if this came from Kryon or a guest, but to me, the information definitely feels from the other side of the veil, is that there are those individuals who are coming onto the planet, and it is in catalytic times where everything is being stirred up because we are moving into the new paradigms. And it's hard. I mean, we are the ones who are boots on the ground, as you said it, but boots on the ground for humanity in wanting to make this a bright future and expecting benevolence. And so I feel that there are some souls coming in and, okay, it's not quite ready yet. I'm going home, and then I'm coming back when all of you down there doing the work have sorted it out. I mean, I know that's not necessarily what we want to hear, right, Lee? Yeah. But I feel that there is that level of change that is happening, and we are so stuck in this body, this time, this now, that we forget that there is a soul overview. And so I want to just say now, I have peace with the plan that my soul is a part of.
I have peace with the plan my soul is a part of.
Thank you.
That sits nice, Monica. I think ultimately that's kind of what we have to come back home to whenever we get caught up in the turmoil that's experiencing. We talked to a guest a little while ago, Giulio Consiglio, who's running a course coming out soon called Spirituality 101. And just to kind of relook at a lot of the stuff. And we were asking him some of the terms that come up around where you hear things like 3D and 4D and 5D and all these things. He said, really simply, he said, 3D is when we are essentially completely engrossed in our beliefs. 4D is when we really start to actually question our beliefs, and it shakes our world up a lot, but we actually start to relook at all that stuff. And then this concept of 5D is having a direct experience of knowing and then acting from that place. And I feel like when you were talking about that and what Kryon was mentioning around where this stuff is going to come up and we see it, what I think is really fascinating is that as this stuff comes up and as these transitions in consciousness are happening, more people are starting to question what they thought they knew to be true, what they thought their beliefs were, whether they were limiting or not. And then I think through that process, and then again, through it being reflected back through like movies and some of these things that you're talking about that are coming down the pipeline too, questioning these whistleblowers, all this sort of stuff, that's part of the questioning. And then I think we eventually arrive at a place of inner knowing, like Monica, you talked about early on with that strong sense of intuition. From that place, that's when I think real change starts to happen. When we start to really embody that now, that's kind of unshakable.
It is unshakable, that knowingness that you are bigger than anything anyone ever told you, and that it's hard to believe, but we are eternal, both directions. We didn't have a beginning. We just always were. And we get to come here on earth and experience this physical body and have all of that kind of hidden from us for us to then discover. And then that's where the magic happens, is when you discover that there is so much more. And I think we're only hitting at the tip of the iceberg. I remember, Lee, once we had that conversation where we can't, you can't see into higher consciousness.
You can't think above the level.
You can't think above the level you're at. Yeah. So I get excited about what is yet to come.
Mm-hmm.
Hear, hear. Guys, in closing, do you have any final comments for people, for the listeners hearing, as far as the concept of creating a new earth, where people can actually practically start to be a part of actually bringing it about, what they're wanting to, what we're all desiring for something new? Any final words, and then where people can learn more about you guys? So
I think final words from me is to make you your own practice of divinity. It starts with you, and community is really important, even if it's just a community of you and one other person or one other precious animal. That too is a community, because it's our connections and belonging and togetherness that is part of why we are here as soul family. So if you are feeling like you're an isolated individual tribe, no, you're not. You're part of the Jason and Tia tribe. You're part of the Lee and Monika tribe. You are part of your own soul group tribe. And know that no matter how dark your darkest days are, someone is always thinking of you and loving you.
I would say I probably have said this every single time that you've had me on the show, and I'm going to say it again. And that is, you are not going to be able to have a higher consciousness or even begin to have any peace over anything if you're constantly bombarded with those who want to frighten you. Do you understand how that would be? I mean, you don't want to go out of your house if at every corner somebody jumps out and scares you and wields, a sword or something. So stop watching the news. Here it is again. They are there to sell things and frighten you. That is their whole idea. Get it online, read it from a source that you trust, and it'll be in the order you want to read it, the subject you want to hear, and it'll be without scored music and fear. How about that? So it's just one of the things we all grew up with, and you just kind of have it there and you watch it, not realizing that the whole agenda is to frighten you so that you'll watch more and watch more. You get rid of that and you got a chance to start thinking higher and have a little more joy in your life. I read the news. I never watch it. I used to be in the business of making music for news channels. And I absolutely know that it is designed to frighten you. So that is what I'm saying. Let's put some joy on a regular basis into our lives.
Well, I never get tired of hearing that, Lee, because I think that's one that we do have to keep putting out and remind people, because it's all that where we keep our attention, and it absolutely can hijack us very easily. So where can people learn more about the work that you guys are doing, the Healing Wednesdays, all of that stuff?
It's easy. Kryonmasters.com is where you go, and it's all there.
We will have those links in the show notes again. I implore you guys to check it out. The Healing Wednesdays, a fabulous show. And again, like we were just talking about with community, if you are feeling like you need to be a part of a bigger community, join our show, but join that show, a really beautiful group of participants there, and interaction.
And it grounds you in a very regular, tangible weekly practice. And there's so much that you guys have actually packed into that period of time with you. Your show is truly amazing. Like, we were a part of it and we got to experience that firsthand. And we always highly recommend it for anyone who's looking for that connection.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's beautiful work. Guys, we always love having you on the show and appreciate your time. And thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Oh, love to you and love to all your 11 chickens.